Well, this is the DC Capstone Report. We're glad to come to you today, bringing you another podcast. Today we're going to look at the tight ends. It's always a good conversation about the tight ends and how they're used at Alabama. We're going to spotlight the tight ends in our first segment. Our second segment, we're going to look at the coaches, the coaches and the new duties that will be working with the tight ends and how that might make a difference and how they're used this year. And then finally, in our third segment, we're going to take a look at someone who doesn't get a lot of recognition on the football team, but someone who makes a big difference in the players, and that's Jeff Puritan.
You're listening to the DC Capstone Report. The DC Capstone Report is brought to you each time this week by Golden Shores Productions.
Well, Gary, it's great to be here on another DC Capstone Report. It's also great to bring this podcast to our listeners out there every week. You know, we've been trying to concentrate on different aspects of the football team leading up to the kickoff against Louisville, and we've spotlighted a lot of different units on the team. And today we're going to spotlight the tight ends. You know, oftentimes people are fans out there that Alabama Crimson Tide always talk about the tight ends and are they going to be used? We're going to throw the ball to the tight ends. You know, last year, Gary, leading up to the 2017 season, there was a big buzz in the offseason about the tight ends, and this year there hasn't been as much. But I want to talk a little bit about that and tell our listeners out there that I think there should be a lot of talk about this year for some reasons that we'll go into later in our segment. But first of all, in 2017, everybody was abuzz about Brian Dable being our offensive coordinator. And knowing what he had done at the New England Patriots with the tight ends there, with Gronkowski and throwing a lot of balls in, a lot of touchdowns, a lot of in the game plan, the tight ends getting the ball. It was really thought that 2017 would be the year of the tight ends at Alabama. All leading up to preseason, they talked about how Brian Dable was going to work the tight ends into the game plan, how they were going to be a big part of the game plan. Well, that didn't materialize in 2017. Actually, what happened, the tight ends only caught 24 balls for 245 yards, and they had 6 touchdowns. So that production as an offensive didn't materialize under Brian Dable. Well, there's several reasons for that. One is Miller Forstall, one of the tight ends that was heavily in our passing game. He got injured early in the season. He injured his knee, was out for the season, and I think a lot of the plays that were going to go for him, they didn't go back to the backups, although the backups played well. Irv Smith Jr. came in and filled in for Forstall when he got injured. I don't think the confidence level in his receiving ability was there from the play calling aspect or from the quarterbacks in the beginning, early in the year. But later in the season, we saw more and more catches by Irv Smith Jr. In fact, he had some catches in the national championship game that helped Alabama win the national championship. And then also, if you look in that last play when Tua throws the ball to Devontae Smith for that touchdown, everybody concentrates on that touchdown because it won the game, and you don't really review that play much for other reasons. But if you go back, rewind that footage, you'll see that the tight end, Irv Smith Jr., held hinges on those plays. The tight ends that were in the game at that time were wide open down the middle, probably could have gotten the 26 yards needed for the first down had they been thrown to. So I don't think it's a part of Alabama tight ends not being involved in the game plan. And Gary, you and I know that the tight ends have been an integral part of Coach Saban's game plan over the years. What our fans don't see is them catching the ball much. That doesn't mean they're not in part of the game plan. So the game plan for Alabama has always been to run the ball to set up the pass. And by running the ball, you had to have tight ends that can really block the edge and seal the edge. And we have had some great tight ends in the past that have been able to block on the edge and seal the edge. And then later in the season, we've seen those tight ends catch the ball more, basically because this is an element of surprise. Alabama hadn't thrown to the tight ends much. They're always blocking on the edge. So there were those plays that were designed for tight ends where the tight end blocked down on the edge and then released and was open down the seam or open around the end. That we saw that in the 2015 national championship game against Clemson. Everybody thought, well, O.J. Howard has had a breakout game here in what he did in catching the ball so much in that game and being open. But actually what that was, Clemson was releasing the tight end because Alabama never threw to him. So they really thought he was supposed to be a blocker on the play. But what happened is that was the element of surprise jumped up, and then that catapulted him into having a monster game with the foot wide open for many catches and touchdowns. And so that was going to translate over into being more involved in 2016, and then under Brian Dable being more involved in 2017, and that never really materialized on the field. Well, this year, coming back, the tight ends, in my opinion, Gary, is the greatest unit we have on offense, is most experienced unit, and the most depth that we've had. Probably have more depth at tight end than we've ever had. You know, in years past, Gary, we've groomed some other position players play tight end. You know, Ronnie Clark had to be moved to play tight end when we were thin there. You know, Forrestall was actually a quarterback in high school, and he was groomed into being a tight end. But now Alabama has gotten to where they're using and recruiting big tight ends to both run block and to catch. As a matter of fact, a big weekend in Alabama was a commitment from one of the best tight ends in the nation who committed to Alabama over the weekend. So the 2019 class is going to have a great tight end coming in. So I think Alabama is going to be known more and more for their tight ends. And this year in 2017, it looks like Harold Hinges and Miller Forrestall, they're going to be back. Miller Forrestall seems to be back in a situation where he's ready to compete and contribute from being injured. You got Irv Smith Jr., who got a lot of reps last year and really is going to be coming back to do a good job this year, I think. And don't forget, you got Major Tennyson and Kedrick James, who both has had playing time in the past. So I don't think the depth at all, probably the best depth we've ever had at tight end. And experience-wise, all those had some game time experiences. So I look for the tight ends to really be a big part of this year's 2017 Crimson Tide. And coming up on the second segment, we're going to talk about why, what some reasons that is, and the coaching and the play will translate into more reps and more catches for the tight ends this year.
We'll be right back after these messages. You're listening to the DC Capstone Report. The DC Capstone Report is brought to you each time this week by Golden Shores Productions. Golden Shores Productions, providing you the best recording facility in north central Alabama.
Well, Gary, in part one segment, we kind of focused on tight ends and how the listeners out there and Alabama fans want to see them get involved more in the offense. Well, I want to go out on a limb, Gary. You and I are going to make a prediction here that this year is going to be the year of the tight ends at Alabama 2018. Now, I say that, Gary, for several reasons. One is it's the most depth we've ever had at tight end. It's the most experience that we've ever had at tight end coming back. We have some players who are well experienced in game time decisions because of the injury to Miller Forrestall last year. We have some freshmen that got some playing time. So we have a full roster of those who have experience. I look for them to really do more this year. Another reason is something that our listeners out there probably haven't put together to see the whole combination of why it's coming together for a perfect storm of tight ends to have a good game plan this year. And I looked at our coaches that we've added to the team. You know, last year the tight ends were coached by Joe Panuzio, and he's a great tight end. He discovered some wonderful tight ends in college before coaching the tight ends the likes of Jimmy Graham and others. So he has a great tight end experience. He's been moved over to running backs coach, but believe me, he'll still have some input on the tight ends this year in game planning. Then you got Jeff Banks, who's come in as first-time coach. He's a special teams coordinator and tight ends coach. If you remember, Gary, at Texas A&M, the tight ends were instrumental in running the ball, blocking on the running plays, and catching the ball over the middle and down the seam. So he has a great experience in coaching tight ends. And then you have Dan Enos coming in this year, first-time coach out of Arkansas, quarterbacks coach. Well, we all know that Dan Enos is a quarterbacks coach, has coached his quarterbacks in the past. If you look at his experience at Arkansas, had some great quarterbacks there, but their quarterbacks there will always have a safety valve. They've always had that second or third receiver they can count on. That'd be the tight end dragging across the middle. And you know, Hunter Henry there made a career out of catching those passes and later made a career in the NFL. So I just think that that's another addition to our coaching staff that's going to help in the tight end game planning. It's going to help our tight ends get the ball more. And finally, Mike Locksley calling the plays. Mike Locksley has had a history of wherever he's been offensive coordinator or quarterbacks coach, using the tight end down the seam, or that drag route across the middle, or that misdirection throwback to the tight end. So I think that combination of coaches is going to bring our tight ends to a different level this year. In 2018, I expect it to be the year the tight ends actually use more and more catches for the Alabama team. And then one last thing that might play a role in this is if Tua becomes the starting quarterback. I believe Tua, throwing left-handed, throwing the ball in tighter spaces, will be more likely to throw over the middle and hit our tight ends in open space than a right-handed quarterback. If you look back in the past when Alabama's had a left-handed quarterback, going back to Ken Stabler, David Smith, Mike Shula, those that have been left-handed, if we have a power running game running to the right, usually the pass plays off that running game are dragging that tight end from the right across the field, going right to left, and that's an easier throw for a left-handed quarterback. So all of those things together, I think, if you analyze it, will give us an opportunity to have a greater tight end presence on the field and with more catches.
We'll be right back after these messages. You're listening to the DC Capstone Report. The DC Capstone Report is brought to you each time this week by Golden Shores Productions. Golden Shores Productions, providing you the best recording facility in north central Alabama.
Well, Gary, on the part three segment of the third segment of the podcast today, we always highlight someone, a coach or someone. We try to bring our listeners out there some information that they may not know about. Well, there's one member of the Alabama staff that you don't hear a lot about, and I just want to sing his praises today, and that is Jeff Puritan. I bet most of our listeners out there don't even know exactly who he is or what he does, but Jeff Puritan was one of the first hires that Coach Saban made when he came in 2007. And what Jeff Puritan's title is Associate Athletic Director in charge of media relations. And what he really does is much more than that. But since 2007, he has helped, of course, with all the media requests for Coach Saban, but he's also installed a program of tutelage for the players to address the media. Alabama has that the first-year coaches aren't going to talk to the media. The coordinators maybe once a year will talk to the media. That the first-year players aren't going to talk to the media. Well, that's not just to keep them from talking to the media. It's that they're trained to this media program to be polished when they speak with one voice, to speak professional and do a good job. What that does is he's training these young men through this system to not only say the right things, but to do the right things and back up what you say. Remember, what you say makes a difference in the world today. And it's helping groom these young men for a life after football, for interviews, for professional jobs, and for playing in the NFL. If you look at some of these NFL players from Alabama, and you talk to the people who are in the media today, I bet you'll find that they are great to talk to. They enjoy the conversations they have with them, and the way they handle themselves as professional. I've heard myself from NFL teams that says when Alabama players come as rookies and they have to go through their first media gauntlet where everybody asks them questions, that Alabama players are more prepared than any other players coming along for that type of atmosphere, for that type of question. And it's not just because the emphasis is on them all the time in Alabama, or the spotlight's on them. It's because that Jeff Puritan does a great job of handling the media relations for the University of Alabama. Now, Jeff Puritan came in 2007. As I said, one of the first coaches hired. I got to meet Jeff Puritan. He probably doesn't remember me. I got to meet him on a behind-the-scenes tour of the football complex for some of us fans or season ticket holders, and I got to go through that. And he actually spoke to us. Was one of the nicest gentlemen that I've ever met. He talked so well and so eloquently, and he was a great communicator. And I've been able to see that he has translated this down to the players in the program that he works under. The people working under him have been able to translate that down to the players so that when they speak well and speak professionally. And for our listeners out there, just a quick story. He told this story. Jeff Puritan came. He was in media relations with the Orange Bowl when Coach Saban hired him away, and he lived in Miami. But before that, he had spent many years at Florida State University being the media relations director for one of the best icons in football ever, and that's Bobby Bowden. And I know that the story, the way he told it to us and the behind the scenes was that when he got the call to come from Coach Saban, I think he was actually, he may have been out of the country when he first got the call, but when he finally was talking to those mentors, people that he wanted to know about where they should take the chance to leave the Orange Bowl and go to Coach Saban, he asked Bobby Bowden for advice. He had enough relationship with him to go by his home and ask him for advice. And I believe that Coach Bowden told me it'd be crazy not to jump at the chance to be at the University of Alabama. And I think it was I think he didn't have to convince himself. I think as he drove to Tuscaloosa, he probably had to do more convincing his wife to move from Miami to work in Tuscaloosa. But I would say today, if you ask Jeff Puritan, you'll say it's probably one of the best decisions he ever made to come and work for someone like Coach Saban and work for an institution like the University of Alabama. He's been able to hone his craft here and translate his knowledge to some young men that's really made a difference in their life. So when you see a young man at the podium talking from the University of Alabama, realize that he didn't get there on his own, that people like Jeff Puritan have put a lot of hard work in over the years to hone their skills, media skills for these young players, for them to make a difference both in their football life, life after football in NFL, or life after football in the professional world.
You're listening to the DC Capstone Report. The DC Capstone Report is brought to you each time this week by Golden Shores Productions. Golden Shores Productions, providing you the best recording facility in north central Alabama.
The DC Capstone Report is featured every Monday morning at 6:15 a.m. on the Morning Blitz with Martin Houston on Tide 102.9. You can listen in live at Tide102.9.com or download the Tide 102.9 app for your smartphone.